Hello everybody once again. In today's video we are continuing our series on things that make noise, and what I have for you today is a noise-making device that has a pretty significant place in history. These are a couple of Kobishi model CLB-27 electromechanical horns. They are often called squealer horns because of the way they sound, or brass squealer horns, although I'm not convinced that these are made of brass, but certainly some type of alloy. But these things saw the height of their use in the 1970s because these were the original sounding device in the early residential smoke alarms. Before piezoelectric horns, like the type used in this smoke alarm from 1991, became low cost and practical enough for mass use in a low cost smoke alarm, these were the devices that did the job. They do it extremely differently, they sound extremely different, and it's just a completely different personality overall. And in the 70s and early 80s, these were perhaps a common sound to be heard in a household, although not too common, hopefully. But today, you don't hear these anywhere. And I have no idea when my two examples here were made, but I can only assume that it was perhaps the 1970s. How I got these was actually kind of interesting. I was looking to get one of these, just because of what they are and what they represent. And I found an electronics warehouse in Quebec that sells these on their website for $1.25. $1.25, and you get one of these electromechanical horns. So I bought two of them just because they were so darn cheap. Shipping was like $12, and they came in a couple of days. Can't go wrong with that. And they were listed as brand new, and I would hazard to say they certainly do look brand new. Another reason these are interesting is because, like the Edwards Dixie buzzer I showed you, these can run on AC or DC, and they sound extremely different when you run them on AC versus DC. And as a matter of fact, because there's separate sets of electrical contacts for AC or DC, you can actually run AC power into the DC pins and it works, and then it makes a third type of noise. So there's actually three different types of noises, personalities if you will, that you can make these horns have, and it's very interesting. So there's a very good reason that these were chosen as the original sounding device for the first crop of residential smoke alarms. They're loud as hell. These are super loud. In fact, they are definitely louder than the piezoelectric horns that replace them. These are extremely loud. I have never sounded one off unattenuated near me for more than a second, because it just makes your ears ring. These are incredibly loud. You wouldn't know it from, you know, how small they are and how unassuming they are, but these are extremely loud, like enough to damage your hearing if you were near one for more than a few seconds. I am not kidding. So these run on 6 to 12 volts, AC or DC, and they actually work on a similar principle to the Edwards Dixie buzzer. However, these are built to a much higher standard, much tighter manufacturing tolerances than the Edwards Dixie buzzer. These were much more expensive than an Edwards Dixie buzzer. But they work on the same principle, and that is you have an electromagnet that is, in this case, attached to a little diaphragm, which is the piece down the center. There's a metal plate that I think is slightly flexible inside there, and it's attached to a little pin, a bobbin, that interacts with an electromagnet. And when the electromagnet energizes, it flexes that diaphragm, but there's a set of points that disconnect, so the diaphragm relaxes, which causes the points to connect again, which causes the electromagnet to energize again, and so on and so forth. And so you get this diaphragm wiggling in there, which creates a ton of noise. And do you know what other sounding device works the same way? A freaking car horn. These are just a miniaturized car horn, and that's why they are so effing loud. Yeah, it's, as far as I know, if my research is correct, the way these work, these are literally a shrunken down car horn. These units made by Kobishi in Japan were one of three major types you saw in smoke alarms of the 1970s and very early 80s. BRK preferred this type. Two similar horns made by different companies you would find. One was called Delta Alarm, and it functioned similarly. And then actually Edwards made a horn of this type, and they still do. They call it the MIDI horn, M-I-D-I, no idea why. And it actually, in my opinion, the Edwards version looks a bit nicer than this. It's got a flat top, and it's made of a shiny steel rather than this brass looking material. But they all do the same thing. Edwards unit is not AC-DC. There's a version for AC and a version for DC, and that's all you get. But other than that, they all sound the same, and those three major types are what 90% of battery-powered smoke alarms of the 1970s and early 80s used, and they all sound pretty darn similar. No two of these horns are exactly alike. There will always be a slight difference in pitch between them. Also, some of them sound a bit less clean than the others. You'll find one that emits a very clean tone, and then you'll find another, perhaps one that has degraded due to environmental conditions that might have a bit of a raspy quality to them. They are very unique between them. And I think that's part of the reason why they are so loved by vintage smoke alarm enthusiasts, is because you get one of these and you'll never know exactly what it sounds like. The only thing you know is that it'll be very, very loud. So when you look at one here and you turn it around, it's got basically three sets of contacts on it. One contact is grounded to the case, and that'll be your one of your DC contacts. And then this pin right here will be your other DC contact. This pin right here is an exclusive AC contact, and if you want to hook AC to this, it'll be between this pin and this pin. If you want to hook DC to it, it'll be between this pin and this pin. Although you can hook AC between these two pins too to get that undocumented third type of sound out of these. But there you can see CLB-27 Kobishi, Japan. Edwards version is called the 118. So when it comes to sounding these things, it's pretty simple. I can just take a 9-volt battery, put it to the terminals. Of course, the issue is how loud these are. I'm in an apartment, and I literally cannot set one of these off unattenuated. It would be heard by all of my neighbors. But luckily, these are actually extremely easy to attenuate just by putting your thumb over the hole in the center. Even a piece of tape over the hole attenuates it quite a bit. But I can do this and put a battery to it, and there you go. I can modulate the sound by removing my thumb from the hole. But now that's not going to satisfy you guys, is it? You want to hear this thing at full volume. What's it going to sound like? Well, you know what? I have a solution for that. I might not live in a place where I can do super loud things freely, but I know someone who's in a place that they can, and that's my own mother. So I'll tell you what, let's bring one of these to Mom's house, along with a 9-volt battery. Let's go out in Mom's backyard and just set one of these off at full volume and see how loud these really are. have the mic on manual level control for comparison's sake. This is my voice, normal speaking voice. I don't know if you heard that, but this thing freaking echoed after I let off the battery. I think you could hear it really, really impressively loud noise from one of these things. And I guess you wouldn't expect anything less considering that these are literally a miniaturized car horn. You know what I'd like to see? I would love to see, maybe it's already been done, but how cool would it be if someone put one of these on their bicycle or something? This would be the most badass bicycle bell that ever existed. Super easy to hook up too. Just a 9-volt battery, a switch, stick this on with a zip tie or something, and you've got a really badass bicycle bell. That would certainly get people out of your way. I think that would just be hilarious. But now, I've only shown you one way that these can sound, and I said there are 3, so let's listen to the other 2. For the other 2 noises that these make, I need some low voltage AC, so let me go and find that. How's this for a setup? I went on Amazon and I bought an Edwards number 592 doorbell transformer. I chose this because it has a center tap on it, so you have 3 different voltages to choose from, which I thought was very nice. And a cheap Honeywell doorbell button that's lit by an incandescent light bulb, which I thought was very nice. So I've got it wire wrapped to the AC terminals here, and I literally have to be, I wish I didn't have to be, but I have to be super brief with this test because this is ungodly loud, just as loud in AC mode as it is in DC, but this is what it sounds like. That is so bad. That is ungodly loud, and you can hear it's a completely different personality than the than when it's running on DC. And indeed, many AC powered smoke alarms, not only of the 70s, but actually quite a ways into the 80s as well, they used these horns as well and just put AC through them instead of DC. And again, just ungodly loud. They have no problem waking you up. I think the problem would be you staying alive and not dying of a heart attack after you wake up. But yeah, a lot of AC powered smoke alarms use these horns as well and just ran AC through them instead of DC. Completely different sound, every bit as loud. But now let's do the third type of sound, which is AC power run through the DC pins. Now, I actually kind of regret, that's the first time I've ever set this off in AC mode, not attenuated, and the sound just resonated off the walls of this place, and I am worried about people hearing that and wondering what the F is going on, if I just electrocuted myself or what. When I do this next test, I'm going to stuff some blue tack in there to attenuate it, because I don't want people to think I'm burning the place down or something. I now have AC running into the DC pins and some blue tack stuffed in the hole there, but here's what AC going into the DC pins sounds like. You can hear a very raspy tone, that 60 hertz modulation on top of the natural DC sound. And yeah, there you go. So I talked about making one of these into an extreme bicycle bell. Well, you could just as easily make one of these into an extreme doorbell. It'd be quite hilarious, but there you go. I've actually decided to try something that I haven't thought of trying yet. I've gone ahead and put a general purpose diode in series. I'm just wondering what this sounds like on 60 hertz rectified AC current. Oh, Heck yeah, that's what the AC powered smoke alarms sound like. They must be running rectified AC into the horn, because that's actually what the 60 hertz or the AC powered smoke alarms sound like. You know what, let me just see if I can just briefly. That's still quite a bit attenuated, but yeah, that's pretty much what it sounds like. Interesting. So that's a fourth way that you can make these sound. Okay, what about a diode in series on the DC pins with AC current? Sounds a little similar to without the diode on the DC pins, but still a different noise. So that's 5 different ways that you can get these to make noise. All of them effing loud. Very cool. And just a little something I'm throwing in post-production. A really neat non-smoke alarm device that used these was a standalone horn apparatus made by a company called Atomco. It's the Atomco number 518. And it's literally a plastic doorbell enclosure, literally the exact enclosure that many low-cost doorbells, including one I'm going to show in a future video, come in. But instead of a doorbell inside it, there's 2 of these horns. And I've only found pictures of one of these in existence on the internet. It's actually in a YouTube video. Somebody who has one of these made a video about it, demonstrating it, and they show the outside and inside of it. And it looks like theirs has a couple of delta alarm horns in it. But yeah, really interesting device. A plastic doorbell enclosure with 2 of these horns in it. And I think it was just sold for general purpose alarm use. I have read an anecdote from someone who said that a vintage like burglar alarm system that was installed in their house used one of these. And yeah, just a very interesting device. And the only photographic record of one on the internet is in this person's YouTube video, which I will link in a card up in the corner. It's a cool little device. I'd kind of like to find one, but there are absolutely none on eBay or anywhere. But it's a really neat device. Well, there you go. That is about all there is to show of these Kobishi CLB-27 electromechanical horns. 5 different ways you can make these sound, all of them absolutely ear-splitting. And of all the noise-making devices I've shown so far and will show in the future, these are probably the most historically significant. These were a very, very important component in the early residential smoke alarms. And vintage smoke alarm enthusiasts lament that these aren't used anymore. You know, they talk about how these, well, first of all, they sound cooler, but also they're a lot louder and more likely to wake you up, which is true. These are definitely louder than the modern piezoelectric horns. But there's also some very good reasons that these aren't used anymore. First of all, these use a ton of power. These draw several hundred milliamps of current, whereas a piezoelectric horn draws almost no power at all. That is a really important difference when it comes to a smoke alarm that just runs on a piddly 9-volt battery. The other thing is that by today's standards now, these are expensive. These were the cheap option to implement back when piezoelectric horns were new and we were still figuring out how to make them make loud noise. But once we figured that out, piezoelectric horns became the much cheaper and simpler choice, and pair that with drastically lower power consumption, and they became the sound maker of choice for smoke alarms. For better or for worse, but that's just how it happened. But I'm glad to be able to show you guys these today, and show you all the different ways they can sound. They are certainly very cool noise-making devices. Now, with that said, you have not seen the last of these yet, because I talked about how these were used in the smoke alarms of the 70s. Well, I just got one. It's from 1977. It was never used, and it works perfectly. And so on our next installment of the Things That Make Noise series, we will take a look at this vintage smoke alarm, which contains a Kobishi CLB-27 horn. But until then, I hope you enjoyed a look at these funny little devices. A big thanks to my Patreon supporters. Their support helps me buy cool, old, and weird things to parade in front of a camera for you guys. And to everyone else who's watching, I really appreciate your viewership as well. Until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you later.